Police officers of Reddit, what are some laws that you feel uncomfortable enforcing because you disagree with them? Before I was a police officer, I was put in a sort of catch-all position, police service officer. Duties included evidence custodian, animal control, court bailiff, code enforcement, and part-time police work. This was 2012 to 2013. Kansas had a rather wet season. For about a month and a half straight we had rain almost every day. No one had a chance to mow their grass. City manager saw it as a grand opportunity for me to start writing people tickets for their grass being too high. I told him I didn't feel comfortable doing that. When asked why, I told him I didn't think it was right for me to write people tickets for tall grass when there are city-owned properties all over the city that had grass just as tall. We went back and forth. He got my captain involved and threw a fit. Before he stomped out of captain's office he made the comment, "This is my city, you work for me, and what I say is law." Captain agreed he was an asshole, but ultimately said I should just write the tickets. So I went back to the evidence locker, what everyone called my office, because I was the only one who had access, and did some research. An hour later, I walked over to the city manager's office, which happened to be right across the street, and handed the city manager about 14 tickets. He asked what those were. I told him I was doing exactly what he told me to do. I was writing tickets for grass being too tall. The first 14 tickets were for the 14 city-owned properties that had grass over 12 inches high. He said those weren't his responsibility. I calmly reminded him of his previous comment about him owning the city, and he called the chief. He insisted I be fired for insubordination. A month later, I was promoted to full-time patrol officer. Not exactly a law, but it's the closest thing I have that's semi-relevant. I did a spell as deputy and had to work in the city jail. When working the jail, I would be put in charge of the holding cells where you would go while you wait to see a magistrate judge to get your bail set. You could be in these cells for up to 72 hours in some cases. Anyway, the rules for this particular part of the jail were that you could not shower for 72 hours, and you got one meal every 8 hours while you were there. Meals were served at 6 AM, noon and 6 PM. If you shower up at 6:30 you were not getting fed until 6 AM for example. The food they would serve was always the same. Bologna sandwich, white bread, American cheese, 1 apple and 1 bag of pretzels. Nothing fancy or delicious, but it would keep you going until you were released or sent up to the normal jail cells. Anyway, I'd always order a dozen or so extra lunches to have on hand for anyone who showed up late or for the homeless who were arrested. I made sure they could shower much sooner than 72 hours and I would help anyone who needed it get in touch with the bondsman to get them out of jail. The way I saw it, I was saving taxpayer money getting them out of jail and they already had the food. That would have just led to wasting the taxpayer money. Plus no one wants to go to court reeking of booze. Most town/city ordinances. Things like not being able to park on the street in front of your house between certain hours of the night. Fuck that. You want me to ticket some dad's car because he moved it out of the driveway so his 5-year-old son could bike around the driveway? Yeah, shit's not happening. Also, certain traffic violations in the middle of the night. You forgot to signal your merge when you're the only vehicle on a 2-lane road at 3 AM. God help us all. Recently expired DLs and plates. A neighboring city wrote a car whose plates expired 11 minutes prior. He said the person should have known it was about to expire and taken care of it ahead of time. Oh fuck right off. We have all had life interfere with things. There's a huge difference between letter of the law and spirit of the law. I would say I'm probably just a terrible cop, but my coffee mug says I'm the world's best policeman, so it's definitely not that. I refuse to enforce speeding under 15 miles per hour unless it is a school zone with kids visible. 5 miles per hour tickets make me sick. I also, as long as they are being cool with me, do not like to enforce suspension for non-payment when I'm stopping them on their way to work. Why punish someone with a fine and tow fees when they are actively doing something to fix the problem? To this date I have yet to write for a headlight/rear light being out. 3+ months minimum for expired plates, but even then, as long as they are cool it is just a warning/courtesy notice, since the state will fine them anyways. A fine from me, and the state is just excessive ammo. noise/curfew type of ordinances given the situation. Example, called for loud noise at a park, 10 p.m. It ended up being teens playing a very competitive volleyball game. Technically the park is closed, and they were violating noise ordinances, however they were sober, as far as I could tell, and just having a genuine good time. Long story short, I drive into the park and pull up on the side, and get out of my car. Not a sound from anyone, and they all froze, and stared at me, until I said thought you could use some more light, and I activated my floodlight, so they could see better. I stayed there, and wrote my reports for an hour. The people who called about them suck emo. Teenagers not out partying or doing things that could endanger themselves or others is a great thing. There is more, but those come to mind first. I'm not a cop, but one of my friends was a military police officer, and a majority of his domestic disputes were because of the wives, but he was always forced to remove the male spouse or the service member spouse in the instance of same-sex couples, or remove the high-ranked spouse if both were in service. The case that really made him want to quit being an MP was our mutual friend had a domestic disturbance called to his house, and his wife, who everyone who had ever met her knew she was a straight up B** and hated everyone. Well, she had started arguing with her husband, and that led to her throwing stuff, anything in arms, reach at her husband. He started to record this, and he was still charged with domestic violence, even though he never hit her or anything, and he had to spend 24 hours locked up in the locked ward in the hospital, because he needed almost 30 stitches total, and had a pretty bad concussion. Both friends have since left the military. The one with the DV charge has been divorced from his ex. He also got the charges thrown out because of video footage. My friend the MP is now a social worker for domestic violence survivors. He assists in how to obtain protective orders, emergency housing, and even name changes. My best bud. Known him 20 years, and his entire family are cops. Dad, mom, sister, and 2 brothers, all cops. Anyways, I have dinner with them from time to time, and I recall one time his brother discussing having to go monitor a protest with all the other cops in their riot gear. I was fascinated that every person, cops, at the table had the same reaction of hating protests for different reasons. One person said it was boring and you have to stand all day. One person said it sucks when the people you're protecting start yelling at you. His mom, who was a dispatcher, said it diminishes responsibility because all the cops were tied up at the protest and that means less patrols elsewhere, etc. Bottom line is, found out cops hate protests. I haven't been a cop for a while, but I had a very brief stint as a deputy sheriff a handful of years ago. I struggled a lot with situations in which addicts were criminalized. There was one man who I remember who had been out on parole, but got caught with drugs in his system. Because of the failed drug test he was getting sent back to jail, and unfortunately, I was the one who had to take him there. It crushed me. It was an older dude who clearly didn't mean to cause trouble and clearly didn't want to be in this situation. He needed treatment, not jail time. We also had a lot of people come through who were using synthetic drugs, like bath salts, when nobody knew what they were, and Bath and Body Works took their bath salts off the shelves. It was frightening to see some of our frequent flyers come back to us more and more incoherent because of these drugs and the permanent damage they were causing. But the truly heartbreaking moment was when I was transporting a young black man who was in for marijuana possession, and he said, "The next time I'm just using that synthetic shit. Your tests can't see that in my system." I went full on mama bear and told him, basically begged him, not to mess with that stuff, and relayed some of the things that I had seen. I have no way of knowing if he ever listened to me, but I really hope he did. Ultimately, my experience in this job changed my intended career path. I had been planning on staying in law enforcement for a chunk of time and then going to law school. I even had judges ready to write recommendation letters and a solid LSAT practice test score. But to see so many stupid and morally debased laws being upheld simply because that was the precedent didn't sit well with me. So I left that job and became a documentary filmmaker instead. Much less lucrative, but a more immediate way to work for justice. Cop here. We have an unwritten rule where I work. I can arrest half my district every night for drunk in public. But that's not practical or necessary. So we all have an understanding on the 2 reasons why we take dips to jail. Number 1, you are causing problems. If someone calls the cops on you, chances are that you're causing problems. Are you acting like an asshole? Dip it is. Number 2, you are very drunk and you can't take care of yourself. You're either going to get hit by a car, robbed, pass out in the middle of a 7-Eleven or worse. But we also have another rule. Are you too drunk to stand on your own? Then you go to the hospital. If you can walk on your own, you go to jail. The hospital is way better than jail, right? No. The hospital is way more expensive, and it's the same amount of time. A dip charges like $30 and doesn't even go on a criminal history. The purpose of drunk in public is not to punish. It's simply to get you sober in a safe place for a while. And believe me, I know for sure by experience that the alcohol is talking for you. I don't hold it against you.